What's going on, folks? Nate here at Tool Dyno Works, and I have one of the most requested bikes that we've ever gotten emails for here on our dyno, and that's the CB1000. And I can also say that this bike probably pissed me off more than just about anything else I decided to dive into a few years ago. When you put a full exhaust system on one of these bikes, and you can see this customer here has a full aero installed on the bike, they're nearly unrideable with a stock ECU mapping. The fueling is so terrible that they just don't make any power all the way through the mid-range. They literally spit, sputter, bog. It's one of the few bikes that I can honestly say you really can't put a full system on without tuning properly. So when Woolwich added support for it in the software years ago, I mean this was like 2021 or something like that for the new generation CB1000s, we went great, and we got one. We brought it in, put a pipe on it, and we couldn't make it work. No matter what we did with the fuel mapping, it just wouldn't change the fueling values. I went round and around and around with the guys at Woolwich over this for over a month until finally the person that we borrowed the bike from at the time just wanted their bike put back to stock so they could ride the thing and not miss any more of their riding season. So obviously we did that, and then I kind of just gave up on it and kind of lost interest in it because, well, I wasted almost a month of my time in between other appointments and could never get anything to function properly. But if you fast forward to today, that's no longer an issue. The maps are properly defined now in the ECU, and the bikes work flawlessly once they're properly tuned and dialed in. But they require a ton of tuning. Here's what I'm talking about. This is how this bike came in with the stock mapping still in place in the ECU and the full aero exhaust system installed. You can see down there that the AFRs between 5,000 and 7,000 RPMs are nearly off the charts lean. There's 17 to 1 AFR at a certain spot there, right about 6,000 RPMs, and the bike just barely runs. It spits, it sputters, it's all kinds of pissed off. It runs hot as hell, and even once it finally kind of gets back to reality, it's still 10% too lean, way out there at the top end of the RPM range. Now, any bike with an exhaust flapper in the stock exhaust system is gonna be really lean once you remove that. It creates a ton of pressure in the exhaust system, so all of a sudden you dramatically change airflow by removing the stock exhaust and putting on an aftermarket system. But this one's exceptionally bad. Normally when I see something like this, you're talking about maybe 30 or 40% more fuel to get the bike back to where it's actually properly running with a correct target AFR. However, there's so many throttle-by-wire restrictions also built into this ECU that once I actually got the throttle to open, it needed more than 50% in that mid-range. And 50% more fuel is nuts. I actually can't think of any other modern motorcycle from any of the Japanese manufacturers that we have to add that much fuel in any place in any ECU just to get the thing to run properly. And in other places in the RPMs, we're actually having to pull away fuel just to get this thing to run properly. So this truly was a complete overhaul of the fuel mapping, both in the TPS and the IAP maps. But 74 passes in the dyno later and a bunch of data logging, the bike is indescribably better than it was when it came on in. With all of our custom ECU mapping, the bike now makes 140 horsepower, 74 pound-feet of torque, and the gains through the mid-range are just unbelievable. If I zoom in and highlight that area there where we were previously 17 to 1 AFR, you can see that the bike was only making about 52 pound-feet of torque. Now it's making 71. It was also only making about 60 horsepower there, and now it's making 80. That much of an increase through the mid-range is astounding when you get on the bike. It doesn't even feel like it's even remotely the same thing anymore. Even compared to stock, which, again, I've seen a bunch of these stock because we spent a lot of time on this a few years ago, the performance improvement versus the way this thing was right out of the factory versus how it is now isn't even describable. Because even bone stock, these things are fucked up. This is a stock run that we did a few years back and we were wasting a bunch of time on this when the software was not properly defined, and you can see that it's still like in the 15 to 1 range right there between 6,000 and 7,000 RPMs. The power curve looks like crap and the bike only made 121 horsepower and 66 pound-feet of torque. Whereas you compare that to how the bike runs now with a full exhaust and proper tuning in place, the mid-range gains just don't even look like the same vehicle. The thing was making 52 pound-feet of torque, now it's making 72. So it's 20 foot-pounds and 25 horsepower from 65 to 90, right there in the meat of the RPM range at like 6,500. Now, it should be made very clear that those gains are not just from getting the fuel mapping properly dialed in. As I've said 1,000 times, for any bike, even one like this that requires crazy amounts of additional fuel once either with a stock exhaust system or even with a stock exhaust system to get it running at a proper AFR, that is the easiest part of this job. The ignition timing maps in this bike are an abomination. I truly don't know what Honda was trying to achieve because it is so retarded in so many areas, but over advanced in others, that it makes absolutely no sense. And the throttle-by-wire mapping is pretty much the same garbage that we see out of all the Japanese manufacturers now that have to meet emissions compliance here in the US, whether that be noise emissions or tailpipe emissions. The throttle just doesn't fucking open. Especially in some of the lower gears, the throttle mapping that we've created to get these bikes to perform properly looks absolutely nothing like what they came with from the factory. The complete overhaul that we've had to do on this bike is truly not something I've ever had to do on any other modern Japanese machine. Because I've seen plenty of bikes that have terrible throttle-by-wire mapping. In fact, that's one of the things that we're most known for, is being able to create unmatched, smooth, and strong throttle-by-wire maps. But I don't generally see that and terrible ignition timing mapping and fueling this far off all on the same motorcycle. So if you do own one of these, and you've been looking for a solution, you've got a full exhaust on the bike, or maybe it's still stock, but you want a hell of a lot more out of it, I can give you a hell of a lot more. Because the custom tuning that we've developed now for this CB1000 platform makes these bikes, and I cannot stress this enough, indescribably better than they are right off the showroom floor. By the time I get this posted on YouTube and our other social media platforms, I'll have the ECU flashing service up on our website, tooldynaworks.com. The ECU flash for these bikes is going to be $349.99. You've got tons of return shipping options to pick from during checkout on our website. And I'll also, by the time I have this video posted, have a few different exhaust systems supported as well. There's not a ton of different stuff out there for this platform because it's not nearly as popular as something like the MT10 or the GSX-1000, but there are a few, and we went ahead and just got them. Because once I realized that this actually worked now in the Woolwich racing software, which, by the way, thank you guys over at Woolwich for finally getting this functioning properly. The end results are fantastic, as you can clearly see here. We went ahead and reached back out to our customers that have reached out to us in the past saying, hey, we can tune these now. If you're local, I need a couple bikes to build mapping for. Come on down, and we can help you out. Because one full system is going to perform a little differently than another. Something like this full aero has a big loop underneath it. That's going to have a different fueling need, obviously, than a pipe that just comes straight off the collector and right up to the end of the bike. And if you're curious about all the different maps and parameters that we modify in these ECUs, I'll have the complete list there in the description on our website. And as always, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to email us, support@tooldynaworks.com. We are always happy to help. And if you decide to go ahead and get your ECU flash through us, we will get it flashed shipped back to you the very same day that we receive it.